So in this video, I wanted to talk about a concept that is not really spoken about a lot, and it's really to do with holistic healing and the four lower bodies in particular. So let me clarify what all of that means and why it's so important, because it's really the foundation for all transformation and healing. And certainly if you want it to be fully integrated and to help you on all levels. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Zimmaron, and I speak my mind and have a lot of training in spirituality. I walked away from the world in my late teens / early 20s, traveled the world, trained with masters and shaman and healers, and used to produce pilgrimages and take people to all sorts of cool locations, and even lived in an ashram for the majority of my life, actually, and was in very intensive spiritual training. So what is everything that I just mentioned as far as holistic healing? So holistic healing just basically means whole healing. It means healing everything from a holistic standpoint. It's inclusive of everything. And the foundational principle of that is that every aspect of self impacts another aspect of self. And there's four main categories of your embodiment. And it's known as the four lower bodies. I don't really like that terminology myself, but it's known as the four lower bodies, which is the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual bodies. And those four particular categories affect every aspect of your life, whether you know it, whether you believe it, whether you are aware of it or not, 100%. And the truth is that if any one of these four are out of alignment, then it's going to negatively impact the other areas. No matter what skills, what talents, or what you believe is going on with you, it will impact it and it will affect it. And there's no way around it, because it will, even at some levels, it will cap what you're actually able to accomplish and achieve in the world. And I'm going to preface before I go on that what I mean by accomplish and achieve in the world, I'm not necessarily just talking about materialistically, meaning becoming ultra successful and ultra famous and all of that. Okay, I'm talking about what's going on the inside. I'm talking about the fulfillment. I'm talking about the health. I'm talking about the access to who you truly are and who you were born to be. So the four lower bodies, the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual, are critical. And they're the four main categories that affect and impact every aspect of your life. So let's talk about them. And I'm going to talk about them in sequence of the hierarchy, because there is a hierarchy, even though they are equally as important and they equally affect each other. So first, the hierarchy, the lowest on the totem pole, so to speak, is the physical body. The physical body is the last place that anything shows up in your life. In other words, by the time you get ill or have diseases, and I'm talking about things like cancer or diabetes or any type of life-threatening illnesses and the decay, accelerated aging and things like that in your body, that means all the others were already out of alignment and trying to tell you what was going on with you. And you didn't listen, or you didn't hear, or you didn't take action, whatever it happened to be. And so then it's now starting to appear in your physical body. And unfortunately for us, a lot of times the stuff that's going on in our physical body may take a while for it to really show up in your life. And that's a problem, right? So if you want to avoid disease, you want to avoid physical pain and suffering, then you want to be addressing the mental and the emotional and the spiritual side of things in order to circumvent the top-down management and things coming into the physical realm. But you have to understand that everything in your physical reality is an expression of all four of these bodies. And that means everything, literally everything that happens to you, everything that you experience, everything that you are able to attain and create in your life is coming from all of these and are result of where there are deficits in each one of these bodies. And I will create some additional videos that will talk about each one of these bodies in more detail. But I also have a really, really, really in-depth 6-month program where each month I focus just on each one of these bodies and then tie it all together and create this whole big cocoon that will allow you to quite literally transform every aspect of your life beyond anything that you could ever possibly imagine. And I'm not overselling it and I'm not over-exaggerating. It's just fact. But the physical body, as you would hopefully already know, is something that needs attention. What you eat and what you consume and your stress levels and how you interact with the world has a direct effect on your physical body, but even more so the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. So above the physical body, immediately above the physical body, is the mental body. Now, I call the mind all of you. So just know that the mind, I don't equate to the brain. So if I use the word mind, I'm always talking about all four levels. I'm talking about that's your whole entire beingness. So it always includes all four of these. And it's an important distinction, and I don't always make it because I don't really think to. But when I talk about the mind, it's always inclusive of the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. But let's talk about the mental. The mental is of the brain, okay? The epicenter of the mental body is very much the brain itself, which has over 86 billion neurons in it. I'm not going to get all technical about the brain because you can do your own research if you want to. There's people that are better and smarter than me that can tell you all the facts and figures about the brain and all the different parts of it and how they impact it and the serotonin and the dopamine and all of that sort of stuff. I like to keep things simple because our goal is for transformation, not for filling our heads with more information. We want to get into our hearts ultimately, and we'll talk more about the heart in a few minutes. So the mental body, the brain, is the epicenter, and the brain controls every aspect of the physical body. Every single aspect. In the physical realm, it's what's responsible for making me open and close my hands. It's what's responsible for allowing me to take action in the world and to have my body respond in different ways. Okay, that's its primary function. Now, it also, to a certain degree, houses memories and programs that we have, and the brain does that in order to conserve energy, because what a lot of people do not understand is that the brain itself consumes more than 20% of your energy. So of all the energy that you have and all the food that you eat and everything like that, your brain consumes more energy than any other part of your body. And that's really important to understand, because when you have an overactive mind and when you're going through distress and the crazy monkey mind, you're burning a lot of energy that is not able to be used in other areas of your body. And so it starts affecting the physical body. It starts affecting your cells, and it starts causing constriction inside of you, because a lot of times the overactive mind is going to induce stress in your body, and it's a result of being in the fight or flight, or a lot of people might call it fight, flight, or freeze. It really doesn't matter, but it's when you're in survival mode. And there are different ways that people react to survival. When you're threatened, okay, so your brain has this primary goal of keeping you alive and to protect you. And this is where the problem is, because when you're in constant stress, and our modern world has really thrust that onto most of humanity, and it's also the conditioning and the programming that we've taken on. And so a lot of people are in constant fight or flight. And we weren't designed to live in that state for extended periods of time. And so when you're in those states in extended periods of time, then your physical body will start to deteriorate significantly and quickly, because that stress, right, is burning up all this energy, and it's also shutting down your organs, it's shutting down certain functions in your body and in your physiology in order to conserve energy and in order to protect itself, because you're now on guard. You know what I mean? You're ready to, and lash out, okay, which we're going to talk about the emotional body shortly. It's the reason why so many people act irrationally in the world today. It's not necessarily because people talk about emotional intelligence as an example, and I know I'm sort of talking about emotions, but emotions are so key to all of this. When people talk about emotional intelligence and people being emotionally intelligent, it's a shame, because what's really going on is that people that are not so-called emotionally intelligent are in fight or flight. They're in a stress mode. They're in survival mode. And what they need is a helping hand to help pull them out of that, and to find a way to shut down that mechanism that is keeping them in this perpetual state of survival and feeling threatened by everything that's going on around them. So the mental body is responsible for how we interact in the world, but it's not the whole truth. And this is where I deviate from a lot of psychology and a lot of the things that are taught out in the world. This is where I deviate significantly, okay? A lot of people teach and a lot of people say that your emotional reactions and your emotionality is driven by the mental mind, and that's not entirely true. It's the exact opposite. The emotional body actually rules the mental body. And I'm going to explain why, and you can either agree with me or disagree with me. It doesn't matter, right? Because at the end of the day, whatever works for you, works for you. But I'm going to say this, that the emotional body is the single most misunderstood body of all 4 levels of our existence. And I can illustrate that simply by the sheer number of people that are on antidepressants. All the mental health issues, people think that that's all mental. It's not. All mental health issues are emotional issues. Antidepressants, depression, all of that is emotional issues. Anxiety are all emotional issues. And you can actually ask any doctor, any psychiatrist, psychologist, or whatever else, yet they will always think, even though they'll admit that they're all emotional issues and that they need to deal with the emotional body itself, but they will think that the solution for it comes through the mental body, and it doesn't. It comes through the emotional body. It's sort of quite blatantly obvious that that would be the case, but we are so conditioned, so conditioned to repress our emotional body. And that's what the antidepressant drugs do. So all the different medications in that particular arena do. They all are designed to suppress the emotions and make emotions more manageable. And it's the exact opposite of what needs to happen. Now, that's a controversial statement. I know a lot of people that are on medication that it's a lifesaver for them, an absolute lifesaver. And I would agree. But the goal is to eventually wean yourself off of those. But the only way you can do that is that you have to be willing to face the emotions that will eventually come up as a result of letting them go. Because the emotional body is the key to everything. And I'm going to explain why. So the mental body we just spoke about, and the emotional body rules the mental body. It has power over the mental body. And the emotional body is what is repressed the most. Yet if you think about emotions, emotions are what make this reality and your life the experience that it is. Because when you feel great, it makes an experience feel amazing and wonderful, right? But when you have a negative emotion, it makes it feel terrible and awful. Now, you imagine if you didn't have emotions at all, you would be a robot. Quite literally a robot. You'd have no empathy, you'd have no compassion, and if you actually look at all the conditions, all the mental health issues of like narcissism and sociopaths and anything on those levels of where people are able to hurt and harm other people, usually they're able to do that without any reaction or response internally because their emotional body is shut down and repressed and suppressed. And yet, at the same time, the reason why they do those actions is because their emotional body is suppressed and repressed. And they were so hurt and so harmed and so misdone by in their lives, somewhere in their lives, that their only way to quell what's inside of them that they're desperately trying not to feel is to hurt and harm other people, because it makes them, therefore, it's like misery loves company. That's what it is that's being enacted. The emotional body is beyond critical, and like I said, it's completely misunderstood. Now, why and how can I say that it's completely misunderstood? The reason why I can say that is because whilst you can do things with your mindset and your brain, and you can ultimately distract yourself from feeling certain types of emotions inside, you're not actually dealing with the source of the emotions in the first place. And the source of all negative emotions is trauma. It's pain, it's suffering, it's things that you went through as a child and as growing up that you didn't and couldn't process or understand or deal with and feel, that you turned inside and against yourself. And the emotional trauma and the pain and all of that, the cellular memory, the reason why it's called cellular memory is because it's actually stored in the cells of your body. It's not stored in your brain where the memories are stored, sort of. In your brain, you have the memories of what took place, but it's in your body, your entire body, that the negative emotions are stored. And as a matter of fact, different organs hold different trauma, different negative beliefs, different cellular memory of experiences that you had. And I'm going to share something very interesting, and it's something I actually learned relatively recently, and that was in relation to rewiring your neurology in your brain. That's the thing that everyone wants to do, right? We can rewire the programming in our brain and our belief systems, and it's going to change everything in your life, and then you'll be superhuman and you'll be able to manifest and create whatever it is that you want because you'll now have an abundance mindset and all of that. But I'm telling you now, how many of you out there, if you're on the personal development route or you've been in it for years, have tried all the different types of hypnosis programs out there, or listening to binaural beats and listening to affirmations and doing all of these things, how many of you can really honestly say that you've accomplished and achieved what you thought you would by doing and listening to these programs that are supposed to rewire your brain? And I would say that most of you are probably going to say not much. You may have, because there is a placebo effect, but that's what I'm going to get to. Most of it is actually more or less placebo. And the reason why that is because you need the emotional body attached to it. And if you actually look at all the manifestation techniques out there that actually have some level of validity to it, they will tell you that you need to not only visualize what it is that you want, but you need to be in the emotion of what it would be like to be in that state of receiving or being that which you're visualizing. Okay, because the emotions is what gives everything power. Okay, that's why it rules the mental body. The mental body does not rule the emotional body. Yes, your thoughts can trigger emotions, absolutely, but those emotions are already inside of you. Now, the key foundational emotion, the only one true emotion that exists in all of creation, is unconditional love. That's the true emotion. And if you look at children, little babies, newborn babies, they're in peace, right? Obviously, if they haven't been traumatized and they're not in a situation where they're crying and all of that sort of stuff. But I can tell you now, I've seen and I've been part of and witness to children that have been birthed in a very conscious way, not in a hospital, not in these jarring environments that are very sterile and not very conducive and peaceful and loving, and you know, even underwater births and without chopping the umbilical cord and all of that sort of stuff prematurely. The natural childbirth is a whole other realm of reality that's profound. But when you compare a child, a baby especially, that has been birthed in a natural way like that, compared to the typical way, night and day. That child will have so much less trauma, will react in very different ways, will be more peaceful, will cry less, etc., versus a child that went the conventional route that will have all sorts of other trauma just from the birthing that they had, which I just sort of let it slip. That's the reason why there's these rebirthing programs and ways in which you're able to regress back to your birth and heal some of that trauma that you received as a result of the process of coming into the world, because there's a lot of trauma that children will take on because it's very unconscious, the way that we conventionally bring children into this planet. So a lot of stuff there, but I don't even know where I was going with all of that. But the bottom line is that the emotional body is critical. There's this saying that I like: feeling is healing, denying is dying. Now, I don't like the word dying on the end of that, but it rhymes and it sort of is quite accurate, because when you feel your emotions, energy in motion, if it's not in motion, it's going to cause blocks. It's going to get stuck in your cells, and it's going to start wreaking havoc in your body and in your mental body as well. So the emotional body, the more that you remove all the non-love, that's what I was actually getting at, is that we're all naturally, unconditionally loving. That's our natural state emotionally. So anything other than unconditional love was introduced through external sources, through our conditioning, through our programming, through how our parents treated us, through how we interpreted the non-love that we received from the world around us. This is really, really like mind-blowing information if you truly get what I'm saying here, because it changes everything. It changes everything when you understand things to this degree. And like I said, the emotions is the number one thing that everyone is trying to distract themselves from feeling with television and entertainment and drugs and all the addictions that we have. All addictions are nothing more than a mechanism that you've created in order to try to quell your emotions, to try and suppress your emotions and not feel. And you're doing it by replacing it with all these things that are giving you these dopamine hits, these short-lived feelings of, I just bought my new car, I just bought this, I just bought that, and oh my God, I feel good for like 5 minutes and then it wears off. That's all that's happening. And even if you're not even aware of the emotions behind it, that's exactly what you're doing. And that's the reason why you're compelled to continue to go shopping, or compelled to continue to do the drugs, or to do whatever it is that you're doing ultimately to pacify whatever is going on inside of you. And I could just go on and on and on just about the emotional body. But the heart is the epicenter of the emotional body. And that's the reason why when you're in heart-mind coherence, and I like to say heart-mind-gut coherence, then you're in alignment, and then you're not in survival mode when you're able to create that coherence, which you're able to do through meditation and through breathing into your stomach. And imagine yourself breathing into your heart while you're physically breathing into your stomach. That's how you create heart-mind-gut coherence. And the interesting thing is that the heart has 40,000 neurons. Now, that's nothing compared to 86,000 neurons in the brain, but 40,000 neurons in the heart shows that it has intelligence. It actually has a lot more intelligence. And we'll get to that with the spiritual body. But not only that, your gut has over 500 million neurons as well. So your gut has a very high level of intelligence as well. And so it's important to understand that, and it's important to align with that. And so the emotional body is critical. Now, the only way to truly heal the emotional body is to feel the emotions. It's the quickest and fastest way possible. It's not very easy to do through the mental body. And a lot of the techniques and healing methodologies and counseling programs and everything try to do it through the mental body. And that's the reason why people end up going to counseling for years upon years upon years. It's the reason why people tend to do drugs or psychedelics or things that force you to have to deal with your emotional body in a level that you wouldn't otherwise do. And that's the reason why those substances or doing certain types of trauma release and programs that truly allow you to access your emotional body are so effective, because they're really getting at the root of the issue. That's the reason why I teach people to always go within, and that your number one focus needs to be to remove all the non-love inside of you. And the cool thing about removing all the non-love inside of you, it doesn't matter whether it's the mental, the emotional, or the physical, or the spiritual that you're tackling, it will automatically start affecting all of the bodies. And it will start just ripping everything out, and you will have a period of time where it will feel like you're on a roller coaster ride, because it's literally starting to flush everything up. And the easiest way to do it is just by simplifying everything down to love versus non-love. And I'm not going to talk any more about that, because I've got plenty of other content out there, and you can certainly get into any one of my programs and coaching courses in order to really get in depth and to take your transformation to the highest possible levels. So that's the emotional body, and I'm sure there's a lot more I could say about that. But now let's get to, and I don't think I ever finished what I was saying about the neurons in the brain. To reprogram the neurons in your brain and to create new pathways takes 6 months approximately to create new pathways in your brain. Do you know what the fastest way to do it is that can happen instantaneously? Emotions, emotional body, emotional trauma. And that's the reason why when something bad happens to you or you have some sort of a traumatic experience, immediately you can go into PTSD. And if you create something in your life that's a very similar situation to what created that trauma, you'll instantly have reactions to it and respond in certain ways that are outside of your control, because your brain and your mind and your body will immediately react to it, because everything reacts to what the emotional impact was. And that's the reason why, if you really want to rewire emotions quickly, you create trauma in a positive way, and that can actually override the negative trauma very, very quickly and replace it ultimately. I don't necessarily recommend doing that, and a lot of people might try and take that into their own hands and do that, but don't mess around with stuff that you don't know what you're doing. I'm telling you now. So, the spiritual body. The spiritual body rules everything. It's the essence of who you are. It's the connection to your higher self, to your God self. It's the source. It's your soul. It's what gives you the spark of life. And the access to your spiritual body, believe it or not, is through the heart. Now, a lot of people might say it might be through your third eye, your pineal gland. There's DMT in the base of your skull at the top of the spine. It's true. All of those things do exist, and they are very spiritual in nature. But your heart is what governs it all, because the more you become love, or the more you become unconditionally loving, the more access you have to your divinity, to your spirituality, to your higher self, because you're removing all the non-love. And so that raises your vibration. When you raise your vibration, you are now able to experience and perceive things from a higher frequency, from a higher dimensional realm. And that allows you to then live from a heightened state of existence. And that's what can also facilitate psychic abilities and all these other things. Now, don't get me wrong here. There are people that have psychic abilities, that have certain access to these realms, but that doesn't mean that they're evolved. It doesn't mean that they're unconditionally loving. It doesn't mean that they're more ahead or more advanced or anything like that. And we have seen that happen many, many times before in the world. And that's because one can still be repressed emotionally and still be taught how to access the higher realms through certain spiritual practices and through, let's just say, focusing on opening the third eye or opening up certain faculties without having everything in balance. And this is where the danger is. Because even though I mentioned all of this hierarchy, which is a true hierarchy, it's the way things are supposed to flow, at the same time, they are sort of like this. You got the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And so people might really, really work on all the spiritual stuff, and they can have the most amazing meditations, but they're emotionally stunted. And they might be mentally deficient, whatever that means. Or they might have extreme amounts of physical conditions that are ailing them, okay? But truth be told, all of them are impacting one another, and all of them are ultimately going to cap them from being able to be fully balanced and fully realized as who they truly are, and to experience this world from a superhuman place. And that can only come from balance. It can only come from addressing all four of these places, all four of these states. And there's only so much you can do without having conscious understanding and relationship with yourself, with your higher self, with your soul, where there's more and more of a merging between your conscious, your unconscious, and your superconscious self. And they need to merge ultimately and become one as much as possible. Now, the truth be told, your superconscious self is infinite, because the universe is infinite, God is infinite, the oneness is infinite, the quantum field is infinite, consciousness is everything, energy is everything. But within that spectrum of everything, there are layers upon layers upon layers of reality and aspects of consciousness. So I know that sort of might get into a lot of other discussions and a lot of other things that I may or may not have described in my other videos. But the point that I'm trying to make is the worst thing that anybody can do on the path for themselves, ultimately, if your goal is to realize and live your best possible life in every single way possible, is to only focus in certain areas and to not be holistically minded. And you'll find that if you work on eating healthy and taking care of your body and purifying it and cleansing it and optimizing it, then your emotional body will also move along much, much faster. And you'll find that your mental body will also move along much, much faster, and vice versa, right? You start doing different mindfulness practices and different ways in trying to think differently and all of that, then you'll find that your emotions will be a little bit easier to deal with, and you'll be able to access them and work through them faster. And you'll find that your physical body will feel better, and you'll have more energy, and you'll sleep better. And if you're meditating, then you'll be able to meditate better and connect more and have access to more inner guidance and be more moved, and in the flow, rather than constantly just butting your head against everything that's happening in your life. It all works together. It all works as one. And that is really the ultimate point of this particular video. And I am going to, like I said, I will at some point in the near future start recording some videos that will specifically go more in depth on the physical body and the physical realm and what you can do with that, and then the mental, and then the emotional, and then the spiritual bodies as well, and the type of things that you can do. But like I said, that's actually part of my 6-month program. That's a complete transformation, complete transformation, where I spend a month on each one of those, and then there's a few extra months, 2 extra months, that go into some additional aspects to those bodies, and really takes things to the next level. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that all made sense. As you know, I don't really script anything. I just sort of sit down and just start talking and hope for the best and hope that, what I share makes sense and that I give a full rounded explanation. And I hope that if you did enjoy it, that you please share, comment, and like and subscribe to, if you're watching this on YouTube, my YouTube channel, join to my Facebook group. Just help me out, help get this stuff out there. I know this video is longer and sometimes people like to consume shorter content. But look, I'm trying to give you everything that I possibly can because it's important. We live in a day and age where there is a lot of misinformation, a lot of confusion, and a lot of people don't realize the power that they truly have to transform every aspect of their lives. And while people are making great strides in certain areas, everything really is an inside job. Everything comes from inside of you, and your outer world reflects that. It's like, why sell yourself short? Because the thing is, there is going to come a time in your life, regardless of what you accomplish and achieve in the material world, where all of this that I share matters. And by then, it might be too late. And that's sad. That's very, very sad.